Yeah, I'm Ziggy Shaw. I'm founder of Chico Games, which is named after my dog, and I'm making a game called The Store Is Closed, which is a furniture store survival game. After the after dark, the lights go out, the staff attack. So you're going to need to in the game break furniture, build barricades, steal food from the cafes, and just try to stay alive and find out what's going
But yeah, we're here to talk about you, Ziggy, and because
on. Sorry.
you're the person who's
Yeah. And
doing, as far as I can see, because obviously we've chatted quite a few times on our indies chat, and then obviously looked around at your different websites and social sites, and it seems like you've just been doing great. And we want to learn what you're doing, and we want to be able to learn from that and sort of
yeah.
apply that some of your thinking to what we're doing and help grow our audience. And maybe some of the other indies who end up listening to this call or on the call can also do the same thing with their projects.
Yeah, no, I'd love to share. I don't think a lot of what I've done is requires any special knowledge. Like I don't come from the industry, and I think it's fully replicatable. Um, like I just started with a plan and kind of followed through, and it happened to work. So I've only made one game so far, so it could just be all luck. But luckily, it's working out, so I can talk out of my ass as much as I want right now. I could say it's anything. I could say I just drink a lot of milk, and that's why I'm really good at making games. Or I live in London. That's required. I don't know.
What is your background, Ziggy?
So I was. I did loads of random jobs. I actually never finished high school. I just kind of did random jobs. Like I was a kind of IT admin. I sold alarms. Um, just did like random jobs until I quit my job to try to be a streamer for a year, which semi worked out for the first half of the year, and then stopped working out the second half, and then realized, hey, trying to do things, trying to do wacky things is actually really interesting. I'm gonna do this, but first I should have a bit more of a plan. So I did online uni while just working part time, and did a computing degree. So essentially, just become a web developer. And it was only in the last year of uni, I was about 23 maybe. I realized I really like making games. Like I'd always wanted to make games. Like when I was 8 or 9, I'd have discussions about how to make the best game and what games should be doing differently. But I never thought I could. It always just seemed so far away. So much so that I did, even when I was going to uni for programming and computer science, I didn't even make games because I just thought it was impossible. But yeah, the last year of uni, I just made a friend who also was making games and just kind of went from there and just got obsessed with it. So much so that I was on track for a first in the first 2 years of uni, and then I almost got a 2-2. Like I tanked my third year because all I was doing was making games. Like I was completely obsessed. Um, and then I just spent a year just making passion projects, not really aiming to be a game developer, but just liking the process. And just did web development for a couple of years. And it was in my second job that I kind of just decided to try to be a game developer, like try to do something that was marketable and try to do something that could let me quit my job, because it was in those 2 years of web development that I realized I hated web development. Like I didn't like it. Like
Sometimes you got to try it.
no, exactly. Well, I couldn't complain. Web development pays well. It's you're like always employed. It's a great like career, but I hated it. I really hated it. And I didn't necessarily hate the programming or web development itself. I just hated that I wasn't doing something interesting. Like none of the projects were interesting. And I guess I just craved that. Like that's all I wanted was to do something. So yeah, I just kind of made a plan to be a game developer, and followed through, which is it's kind of worked out.
Yeah, it's great that it's worked out. It's actually I find it quite annoying because I also have that thing where I just have to be making stuff. Otherwise,
Yeah.
longer term, I start getting a bit miserable. And then I realize, oh yeah, I'm not making anything. That's why.
Yeah.
And it's quite annoying because it's not a practical thing to try and make money out of your creative pursuits. It's really hard. So it would be nice if you were just satisfied doing what would some people might consider a more normal job. But yeah,
But it's a great job. Web development is amazing in terms of it's like a cheat code when it comes to careers because you get paid very well. The employers respect you. You're in high demand. You always have a job. Like it's the perfect, just generic job. So I couldn't complain to my friends about it because you'd seem like a dick. But yeah, I like you, and like I'm sure most people working in games realize that not making something made you absolutely miserable. And yeah, I just kind of went, I have to do something interesting. Like I'm going insane.
What was the plan? Can I ask what the plan was, or is it
Yeah, of course. No, it's not
plan?
Nothing super secret. I mean, when you're like talking to your friends about the industry and you kind of like just spitballing or chatting out your ass saying, why don't game developers do this? Or why don't indie studios do that? Like, it seems like such a no-brainer. I'd had a couple conversations with friends about why don't indie studios target specific fan bases, like with their pre-built audiences. Like, there's so many fan bases that have no games for them. There's a reason there's movie tie-in games, because you have this audience built in. It's just free, it's a free company. So it's like you have a free audience. And I was like, this isn't special. You could do this with so many different like fan bases. Like you could make a Buffy game. You just don't call it Buffy. You just have, a teenage high school Buffy, vampire slayer, and then you have some hot vampires. And people will click. They'll get what it is, and you'd immediately have an audience, and it would have like something that makes it special. And I'd have these conversations with people. But this is before I even started making games, and we'd be like, all those idiot game developers, they don't know what they're doing. But you kind of just chatting shit. But there's also conversations about the SCP fan base specifically, and there was the idea that when there are games being made for a fan base or in a genre that are fairly like middling or just purely made by hobbyists, there's this fan base and this expectation that is much lower than most genres, and all you have to do is just be better. Like if you're competing in platformers, you have to compete against Celeste. You have to compete against Mario. You have to compete against all these amazing games. But if you find genres that just aren't represented very well, or take on mods that exist that have huge fan bases, but they're just made by hobbyists, the competition just isn't the same, but the fan base is there. So there's these two like conversations I had that kind of sparks the idea for going for The Store Is Closed, because it's based on an existing fan base called SCP, and there's already games like based on the same like SCP universe and the same even like Infinite IKEAs, which is what my game is based on. There's already games and mods based on it, but they're all made by hobbyists. So it's just like if someone really took it seriously, like it could be big, and it seems like it was, which I got a bit lucky, but that was the theory anyway.
Yeah. So what? Maybe not. I'm just a bit interested in SCP because I don't know what it is. Could you maybe give us in a nutshell what it is?
So SCP is basically the internet's version of the X-Files. So SCP itself is a fictional organization that tracks and monitors paranormal and alien and different dimension beings, and they're all it's a collection of short stories written by the community around a made-up fandom, but it's huge. It has like millions of fans.
So is that how you found your community, Ziggy?
So initially I built a trailer that was like generally targeted to everyone, but also targeted the SCP community. So I knew that would be the launching pad. That would be the built-in audience that I'd like get my first fans from. And that was true to an extent. So I just posted on Reddit. I posted on the SCP subreddits, but I also posted on like the gaming subreddits. And funnily enough, it kind of exploded everywhere, which is why I chose the Infinite IKEA idea, because I felt like a game set in an infinite furniture store is a lot more relatable, because most people have been stuck in a furniture store before, and making pillow forts is something everyone did in childhood, and it's kind of a no-brainer that it's more has a wider reach than just the SCP fandom.
So when you posted that trailer, had you already made a demo, or you just were putting ideas together? What did it actually look like at that stage?
So my initial, plan and execution was I wrote a trailer before I even wrote any code for the game. I just sat down. I was like, I should make a game based on the short story. I sat down, wrote a trailer, and I went, what do people want to see in trailers for survival games? They want to see crafting, combat, base building, and just a world that looks very it's very much about the atmosphere. So I just wrote down a list of things that I would need to develop in terms of a game, and wrote a trailer that I knew I could put together. So just a simple set of shots, my voiceover for the trailer, and I just went, I'm going to try and make this in 6 months. So I did that while working as a game developer, a web developer. I just 9 to 6 web development, and then 7 to 12 game development for 6 months, which is kind of insane.
It's really hard when you've got a normal job doing stuff on the side and doing it consistently. That's the hard part. It's like, I'm so full of energy this week, I'm going to do all this stuff, and you do, and then next week and next week and next week, that's when it gets tougher.
Yeah, but I think there's a combination of knowing it, thinking it's this is a good idea, this will work, and also just really hating my job. I just didn't want to be a web developer, and this was my ticket out. That's how I saw it.
And did those? You said you made the mock footage and you posted it and got really good response from fans of SCP and just fans of gaming in general. Is that what pushed you as well to keep going in your spare time and actually turn it into a proper demo?
Well, what about my response? I'd already previously in life quit my job very quickly to be a streamer, because I had an opportunity to be a streamer. I was getting a few hundred viewers on Twitch. So I was like, let's see where this goes, and just quit my job. So I was already prepared to quit my job again, because I'm a bit of a shut-in. I have loads of savings from that. Fuck it, just do this for a year. That was my initial plan, if it got any kind of traction. So my initial plan also included a Patreon, because I knew that with a trailer, it's really important to have a call to action that goes somewhere. So most game developers would do wish lists. You should set up your Steam page before releasing anything, really. But that's kind of a no-brainer. But for me, my goal was to not be a web developer anymore. So I knew that I needed people to pay me somehow, and that's done through Patreon if it's not even early access, because I didn't want to put it on Steam yet. So I built it's basically a demo. Most of the tech is the same that is in the game now, but it had procedural generation, had combat, had base building, and it was 4-player online. Just because I don't play many single-player games anymore, so I wanted to make a game that I wanted to play. But yeah, the goal was release the trailer and link them to the Patreon through the trailer. And my initial plan was quit if I got 400 a month on Patreon, which just seemed like such an impossible goal at the time. I just thought that would never happen. 400 a month is influencer levels, because Patreon's quite hard, seemingly. But I got 1,500 that first month, and I was just
wow.
Which is less than I made as a web developer, but that's more than I was already planning to quit with. So.
What is the appeal to the Patreon people? What are their expectations? Why are they there?
So for me, I've heard lots of advice that's you should communicate to your patrons, you should give out updates and stuff. But for me, my main selling point was you get access to the beta or the alpha. That's got online multiplayer on Steam. But yeah, that was it. Just you can play literally at the end of the trailer is like the alpha is available from Patreon. That was it.
And
so it was like an early access.
Do you think those initial Patreon people, do you think they were majority fans of the SCP universe, or were they also just fans of gaming who happened to see it on Reddit, or some kind of mix?
I would say maybe half to 2/3 of people were not from SCP. And that kind of surprised me a bit, because my initial plan was launch through the community. The community really are like the safe haven for me. Like I'll always get a good response from the community, while the wider gaming sphere is a lot harder, like way harder. And since I'm like a first-time game developer, my plan is always find the easiest route. Like that's always my plan. So just find the route where the competition is less, where it's just easier in general. So just making games for communities that just don't have games. So I think it's such a good way to do. Like if you really want to just be a game developer with the least friction.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your because now you have a Kickstarter and you have a Discord community, and you have TikTok still doing well, right? So what was the sort of journey from initially Reddit and then Patreon, and what did you do next?
So initially with it blowing up on Reddit, I got like 4,000 wish lists in like a week.
Oh, wow.
I was like, this is amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was like, that's amazing. This is like the craziest thing that's ever going to happen to me. I didn't think anything. I think the only future for me in terms of getting bigger was for YouTube. That was my initial assumption. And I watched all the YouTubers. I kind of like the idea of being an influencer. So I was like, I'll try, YouTube videos, try devlogs, because they're doing really well right now.
Okay.
So I initially, to test and to practice my editing skills and writing skills, I was just on a throwaway whim type thing, just going to make some TikToks. That I had no plan of it doing well. I didn't use TikTok. I always thought it was just for dances, and I just didn't really get it. I wasn't on Vine. I just didn't understand TikTok. Now I'm fully addicted.
It's so hard. We've started using it for Mind Feast, and so I'm doing it, and it's so hard to get off. Because every time you press off, it shows you another video, and you're like, "Oh, I'll just watch this." An hour later. I
mean, anytime your brain is bored, you just go, "I could be on TikTok right now." Anytime.
I could have watched 10 videos by now.
Yeah. But yeah, my initial plan was just test, train editing a bit, because I didn't know how to do it. And they just the first 3 or 4 got 1,000 views, which is decent, but just didn't matter to me. That wasn't my goal. And then for some reason, the 4th one just blew up. It went crazy. Got a few 100,000 views. And just subsequent ones kept getting a few 100,000. And suddenly I was getting 6,000 wish. I think I was getting 1,000 wish lists a day for a few weeks. It was crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
And the Patreon goes from 1,000 to 3,000, and I'm like, oh well, I'd already quit my job by then. So I was like, well, I guess it's fine then. It was a good idea.
That must have been super reassuring.
Yeah, ridiculous. I was so lucky, and it just happened to work out.
What was the time scale, Ziggy? Was this weeks or months or days?
I think, so Reddit would have been day 1. I literally just released the trailer with the Patreon, with the alpha, after 6 months of development. And then I think TikTok was maybe 2 or 3 months after, just when I was quitting my job. That's always, it's a funny conversation you have with your boss when you're just like, I'm quitting my job, and they're like, what? It's I'm making a game, it did well on Reddit. They're just like, the fuck, what are you talking about? I didn't mention game development at work. I didn't talk about it, so it came out of absolute left field. That was a funny
dear.
one.
Yeah.
People didn't know if I was joking or not,
Yeah. Okay, so you had the Patreon. It was well on TikTok. You got more Patreon funding.
Yeah.
And then you started making it. Well, you were already making it by this stage, right?
So my initial demo the thing is, I was learning to make games. I'd made games for a year prior to this. So the 6 months it's probably my third game, my third project I'd ever opened in Unreal Engine. But my previous projects had been like way too over-engineered, way too complex. I'd spent a year making a real-time strategy with multiplayer. So I knew a lot of like the technical ways to make procedurally generated worlds, how to handle multiplayer. I knew a lot of the technical stuff. That I thought, oh, this will be simple. So my initial alpha that I built, I literally scrapped. Like every single piece of code has been rewritten like 1.5 times now, because I just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah,
I had just enough knowledge to cobble that together.
So what was that initial demo that people on Patreon did have access to? What was their reaction to that? Did they enjoy it or what?
They liked it because it was better than most other SCP games out there. So everyone was very, very excited and very, very like generous with their like praise and their reactions, and
which was your
kind of exactly what I wanted. Yeah, because I'm not going to be able to make a great game initially. I need a market that's a lot more generous, and also survival games. People are so much nicer to survival games than any other genre by far.
Really?
By far, like people. Especially, I don't know if you remember The Forest coming out. It was like the most buggy.
I haven't played it, but yeah, I know of it.
Just had no content in it. You could build like a fire, and there was like one enemy, and people thought it was the most amazing thing they'd ever played.
Why do you think that audience is more generous than it? Because the typical Reddit/online gamer can appear to be quite harsh, even though it's probably the minority of people are, and they're very loud. But that's kind of how it may seem sometimes. So why do you think it is not like that in that genre?
I think it's because in survival games, the most important thing to nail, I think it's less so nowadays, but especially early days of these indie survival crafting games that were like so popular, is that if you nail the atmosphere, it does so much for your game compared to so many other games, because it's one of the only genres, survival, that the atmosphere is just like important. Like there'll be loads of gamers playing platformers who will not even think twice. They'll skip all the dialogue. They won't care about the world. They're just playing platformers. Like, roguelike, if it's like a multiplayer game, no one cares about the atmosphere. They're just playing with their friends. But survival games are very different. Like in a survival game, you might be stranded on an island. So every single mechanic that you adds so much. Like if you can break a coconut, it feels so much like you're on an island. If you can build a fire, it blows people's minds, because that's what I do on surviving on an island. Like this, everything you add just adds so much. So people are very excited also for the future of survival games. While if you played, another game and you're missing content, it means you probably only have 2 levels. So people will play the 2 levels and get really upset because there's not enough game. But survival games, there's 4 things to do. People play it all and they go, oh, I can't wait until I can build a boat or something, For some reason, it's both the atmosphere matters, so if you nail it, it's fine, but also people get really excited about the future.
Okay.
So you ripped up all of your old code now. Was there
Threw
a
it out the
transition
window.
of you can play the game, people on Patreon, oh, there's a lull of nothing and now there's a new game, or was it a smooth transition?
No, it was pretty brutal for my community. I'm not a very nice community manager. I think there was a solid year without an update, which is insane. That's an insane thing to do for any game developer.
Okay.
It's because I thought at the time that it would take 3 months to redo all the code I'd already done, maybe. But it turns out actually there's a difference between hacking together an alpha that just barely works and actually making a game that could be commercial, could target different platforms, has localization, controller support. Like my initial demo or alpha only had, I think it was 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers at world, which is a lot, but it's an infinite furniture store. So like building in, infinity is very different to just making a small. Turns out, from a technical perspective.
Yeah.
I heard that infinity is bigger than 2000.
It's very big.
So it turned out all the world generation I built for 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers didn't work when I needed to scale. There's also issues where you load a chunk, it would hang the game for a quarter of a second. So I had to learn how to like multi-thread the code, like use different cores in the CPU. I just had to learn so much I had no idea how to do before. I'm super glad I did it. But
did you communicate to the audience as you were going along?
No, okay. I do not follow what I did. It was kind of mean. I had my friends who work as community, like they do like admin and community management for Twitch streams. So they're very used to dealing with the angry people in a very diplomatic and nice way. So they did a really good job. And I occasionally I threw like scraps of like concept art and new models and new things. But yeah, I essentially spent way too long doing this rebuild, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. I took on too many parts. Like I broke too many systems to not do everything all at once, because I was inexperienced. So if I could do it again, I would do it one system at a time, releasing updates as I go. I could have had at least 4 or 5 updates at least along the way. But yeah, it was simply my inexperience in breaking too many systems while I was trying to do this.
In that, you said almost a year you didn't have any updates. Did those Patreon people stick with you or unsubscribe or?
So luckily my TikTok was doing well, so I always had a flood of new people. So I stayed above 2K the entire time, which is very, very like good in terms of a game that hasn't been updated for a year.
Yeah. Was that you were making new TikTok videos or just the ones that were already out there?
So I made a burst near the beginning, which was probably about 3 months into the like rebuilding of the game. Okay. And I'd occasionally do one like here and there, but they just kind of kept growing organically, seemingly. Also, YouTubers would occasionally make videos. Like I'd occasionally reach out to random YouTubers and just be like, "Hey, I'm making a game." So I kind of got a trickle of people joining. But secretly, if I'm honest, I kind of liked that a lot of it died down because there's just less pressure. Like I've seen so many indie games, so many indie developers, especially solo developers, kind of crack under that kind of like community. Like I don't know if you remember who's the guy who did Fez, who just went on like Twitter rampages.
Yeah,
like he made a brilliant game, but he seemingly couldn't handle the community. He took it so personally, and I just wanted to avoid that. I didn't want to take feedback personally. I'm talking to a lot of indies who released games. They just say like the feedback really gets to them, and now they have a community. They feel really like terrified to do anything. So in a way, I was quite like thankful that it was dying down a bit.
Amazing, but people were still sticking with you. So you could keep going. That's really nice.
Yeah, just literally just the luckiest, like falling upwards kind of story. Like, what did you do to be successful? Nothing. Like,
I gave no updates.
I tried to sabotage everything and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So, once I realized it was taking ages, my next goal was I might as well just do a Kickstarter. If it's going to be a big update,
okay,
might as well have a purpose behind it.
Yeah, so if you've already got the Patreon going and people seem happy, new people to subscribe and some of the old people to keep subscribing, despite that period of no updates, what was the reason to go to Kickstarter then?
So I'd also been talking to publishers at the time because the wish lists were very good. And that's usually a good way to get publishers. And having talked to all these publishers, and I need like 2 programmers and a artist, or one programmer and 2 artists. I was building like the business plan and the budget and going to these publishers, and people were offering me the money I needed, but with horrible terms since I'm a solo developer with no experience. So like literally like 70% of all your revenue until everything is given back, and then 50% for the lifetime. And they wouldn't budge on any of those numbers. So like I was very lucky that I would get these insane numbers I was asking for. But I just didn't like the very long-term implications of 50% of revenue on what could potentially be my only successful game. So my next goal was, and what I'm pursuing right now, is try and get one of those exclusivity deals with Epic or Microsoft. Because it's not a publishing deal. They tend not to give money to very early games. They tend not to give the money in order to develop the game. They'll usually give it maybe a year before release, with the intention that you just release a game that's almost done. So I was like, I'm going to get my game kind of a year away from early access, and try and make a splash in some way that I can then approach these like bigger people in the game, like Microsoft and Epic. So hopefully when the Kickstarter ends, I can find some contacts. I've contacted Microsoft, but I don't know anyone at Epic.
So the Kickstarter was just to show that you have an audience to other companies.
Because Patreon, I've hidden all the stats. So like I have like almost 100,000 wish lists, which is great, but wish lists are worth less and less nowadays with demos becoming so popular. So I need a way to show I have an actual audience, and I could only think that Kickstarter would be the best way to do this.
And I think it's going well.
Yeah.
You've exceeded your goals.
Yeah, for sure. I thought realistically I'd get maybe 20k if I was lucky. So I think it's gone very well.
And
how's it?
Sorry, go ahead, Julia.
Well, I was just going to say, for people who don't know, could you? So you hit the 20k, and you're still going. Are you? It's like about 40k now or something.
Yeah. I think it's coming up on 40k, so I need to make more stretch goals. What's funny is a lot of my stretch goals were things I planned already. Not many of them weren't planned, but now I'm actually going to have to come up with very new things. If it goes much past 40k. But you put down on Kickstarter, you tend to just put like a lower number. So I thought 10k is realistic with the audience I had, but probably we'll get to like 20, maybe 30k. So 40 is amazing.
And so originally people on Patreon had access to the demo at the time, but now that's no longer the case. So how do people on Patreon now feel about the Kickstarter? Do you know that?
So people who paid for the alpha on Kickstarter, you only had to subscribe for 1 month to get it. So you just got it forever. Like everyone who's ever paid on Patreon will have it until release. The Kickstarter, like the alpha from the Kickstarter, is the same from the Patreon. So yeah, essentially those $3,000 a month were like always people flooding in. Like it wasn't many retained because there was no real reason to retain your subscription. But you could pre-order through Patreon. So if you subscribed at any month for $15, you could just once the game is released, I'll email these people keys. So they're not losing anything.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to do that. I've seen Patreon game models like that where you have to stay subscribed. And in fact, like trying one of those games is what made me choose this model where you just subscribe once. Or you can, support if you want, or you can forget, which I assume a lot of people do because I always forget these things. But surprisingly, you get big spenders even on Patreon. Like I've had like 2 people do 50 a month from the start, which blew my mind. Like that's crazy. But it's a great way for people to show support. It seems.
It's all perspective, isn't it? It depends what your income you have and what you're used to. If you're literally a millionaire, then maybe 50 quid a month doesn't sound like much.
Yeah, it's like nothing.
But
to me, I'm like, whoa.
Fair change, yeah. And can you talk to us a bit? I realise we've got about 15 minutes left, and maybe other people have questions, but I just wanted to ask about the Discord as well. Could you talk us through that too?
So I occasionally ran. So I set up a Discord because I use Discord and it's a great way to maintain a community, and it was also a reward through Patreon that you got access to certain channels. Because I wanted a way for people to give feedback, and I use Discord, so that seems the most the easiest way. And what I didn't do, which I should have, is I should have pushed Discord as a way to collect people, because I don't know if people sign up for mailing lists anymore. Like I put one on my website, and I've maybe got 10 people. But what I should have done is just accumulate Discord people. So any indies starting now, just if you have nothing else, if you don't have an Instagram or Twitter, just get people onto a Discord, because you can @ everyone, and it's better than an email because it's immediate. And if you're sparing of your @ everyone's, then people will pay attention, which is nice.
Although, can I just push back a little bit on that? Just do you think it's possible that a lot of people by default make sure they can't get atted at everyone? Basically, they mute the server, and because when you're on a few and you start seeing, it becomes infinite spam. So by default, join a server, mute it, and kind of look at it whenever I want. I wonder how many I do that. I wonder how many other people do that. So,
I do that too. I agree. Yeah. I do that too. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people do like these updates, and they're very careful about what they join. So I mean, that's I guess part of being an indie is just realizing that at least, especially my habits aren't going to be the same. My gaming habits aren't going to be the same. Tuning habits aren't going to be the same. I didn't use TikTok, and there's no one on TikTok when I was starting. There was one other game developer. I can't remember their name. So it really was a gold rush at the time. No one else was on it, and I didn't even think it was going to be anything, because I'd heard so much on Reddit game dev that it's a complete waste of time, that it won't convert, that the audience won't spend any money, no one's going to click off TikTok. And I think that's true to an extent. They won't easily go to a different platform. They don't go to YouTube if they're on TikTok, but they will remember your game, and if it pops up on Steam or on Twitter, they'll click on it. It's like a saturation type marketing rather than something else.
So just before I don't know if anyone does have any questions, but I'd just like to ask one more thing so you've tried a whole bunch of different things, and it sounds like for the most part it's all gone well. There hasn't been a lot that's gone badly. I mean, you said, I could have done Discord earlier.
YouTube didn't go well.
Say again?
YouTube didn't go well at all, at least in terms of numbers, I would say.
Okay.
I spent a solid 2 weeks making a devlog, and I think it has 5,000 viewers, maybe 10. But 2 weeks of development is a long time. Especially at that, when I was instead of spending 2 weeks making TikToks, which were getting hundreds of thousands of views, I was I'm going to try YouTube. And it just didn't translate at all. And I put way, way more effort into my YouTube than I did to my TikToks. So yeah, YouTube, you have to be dedicated to it, it seems. It needs to be, your goal shouldn't be to make a game. It should be to build a brand, to build a community, to become an influencer. So I think they're very separate goals. And TikTok works a lot easier, and Twitter is the same. And YouTube is just a separate goal and interest, at least in my eyes. I think it's hard to be a game developer and a YouTuber.
So with that in mind, going forwards, and now you've got people helping you out on your own Discord, for example, so you don't have to do all of that community management yourself, what is the strategy going forwards as you think towards whether it's Steam or consoles, or you mentioned Epic and things like that? What are you going to do to continue building the audience going forwards?
No, I don't know if there's that many avenues left, apart from waiting for a new social media to turn up. It would be nice to have more bandwidth. If I just had more people on my team and had more bandwidth, I could put a lot more into TikToks. I should be making a TikTok a day, every single day. There's no reason not to. But it just kind of takes a few hours. It's hard to switch contexts. So instead, I make one a month, which is ridiculous. I should be trying Twitter, trying YouTube every day, but I just don't. I just don't have the bandwidth. At least I'm sure everyone's the same, especially with programming and development. It's very hard to just swap to other things. But yeah, so looking forward, maybe hiring someone to just take some of the tasks away. and just being more consistent and just trying more things. Because I think that's one of the number one things that people do wrong when it comes to marketing, is they try one thing and it doesn't work, and they try it again and it doesn't work, and they go, oh, it must be the platform that's broken. And they don't see it as themselves being wrong. So I've done this with YouTube, but I just probably haven't tried enough. I haven't tried different things. It's very easy for me to go, oh, it's the platform that's wrong.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's never a case of, oh, this is good, so it's popular. There's so many complicated things. It's human interaction to machine interaction back out to human interaction. So there's this whole middle of layer of complicated stuff which we don't really properly understand how. We have an idea of how it works, but and probably the people working on it don't have a 100% understanding.
No, I don't think they do.
So it's hard to write off your own content as, oh, the content wasn't good enough. It's a difficult one to judge of when to keep going and when to stop, as you said. But
that's true.
Yeah.
But if I had infinite bandwidth, I might try to build a YouTube community. Like I've seen, a very good way, if you're good at making games, is to build these remakes of concepts and games. So people take mobile games and make them in Unreal Engine, or they take fake adverts for games on TikTok and they turn them into games. And these get a lot of views, and I think you could kind of build an audience. I think there's so many avenues to build audiences. You just need the time. Like I've seen so many people doing new creative things on YouTube.
So it sounds like, then, to summarize, the answer to my question is you're just gonna actually more focus on making the game for now, and occasionally do a TikTok, occasionally do something else, but you're not really that bothered about building the audience because you already have quite a substantial audience. And you
yeah. I think now it's just I'm lucky that the end goal is just to release a game. I've built the audience, got the wish lists. Right now it's just like me focusing most of my time on building the game, but if I can do these business deals, I can hire people, and then I'll be able to do a bit more community stuff. But yeah, like sadly the Kickstarter is amazing and it's great, but hiring programmers is so expensive that I wouldn't be able to do it without a publisher or a deal, even now, which is crazy.
Yeah. So, Shaz, did you have anything else?
No, I was going to say, like Stefan or Rupert or Caitlin, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
I was wondering, like you mentioned, you were trying to do streaming for a while, and do you feel like by doing that, did you approach your game and the development in any way? So what I'm looking for, kind of, if you make a game to be kind of enjoyable for an audience, did you feel like did you try to do anything like that?
I think streaming gave me a good perspective on how to do my next big dream or whatever. So with streaming, I took it so personally when it didn't go well. I took all the community feedback so personally. And that what I didn't realize at the time is that's a bit of a spiral. And I realized that I can't take these things personally. I need to separate myself from the audience. And it's possible that I do that too much with my own community. But that's what's helped me just keep going. Like, the 6 months making the game and then the year after working alone, just realizing that you need to separate yourself from the reactions you get. Like if you put something out and it's not good, just keep going. But also just it kind of gave me a lot of confidence in myself that something could happen. Because being a streamer is there's so many people who want to do it. So I also got very lucky with streaming. I just happened to play a lot of Team Fortress 2, and then I streamed Overwatch and just happened to do well. But yeah, it was more it's less specifically for game development, more just attitude towards doing projects, I guess.
It's how you feel like of the audience, like when you come getting feedback. Is there any one of these channels you've been using where people are more negative or more positive?
So
where complaints come?
I'd say I quite like the negative feedback nowadays, especially at least if it's constructive. So Discord, Twitter, YouTube, everyone's so positive. TikTok, most people they're not big fans of you, so they're more asking just questions about it, and then other people will answer who are fans of you. But Discord is where you get the real meat of people giving their proper opinions. So I'm always amazed when someone writes an essay about all the things I'm doing wrong in the game. Like, that's amazing to me, because I used to write those essays when I was like a dumb kid. Like, I thought it was incredible. So I really like the constructive negative criticism. But nowadays, because I have someone doing community management, if someone is just like inflammatory, like just being rude, they'll just be kicked. So it's as long as you moderate your spaces, you can kind of shield yourself. And that's why I think so many people get so I don't know, like Twitter seems to do a lot of damage to people because there's no filtering. You just have to manually block everyone. Like, everyone can say anything. So I've seen that a lot. Like, people get big on Twitter, they get very, very invested on people's opinions just because there's no filter. So yeah, I guess you can just protect yourself by moderating.
So one last question: how many people have you kicked from the server?
Probably like 200, maybe now. I don't know. I think we looked at some point.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was that.
What's the typical thing they do that you think, okay, bye?
People just spam, like, pictures and stuff. For a while we disabled all images, but it's kind of annoying in a game server where you want to share your experiences to not share images. But people just share like not safe for work stuff, and or they're just very rude. Like, they'll be like, I want a refund, and then it's just like, you check their account and they bought it like 6 months ago, and it's just like, I can't give everyone a refund. I'm sorry, guys. Or like, just if someone's being childish. I know my community is going to be fairly young because the SCP fan base is relatively young. Like, there'll be like young teenagers, like, so I want to like just have quite a clean community. But with young teenagers comes edginess, so you just have to moderate it.
It's tough, yeah. I've got a friend who works for a company who make games on Roblox, and they're one of the biggest ones, and she's community manager, and she says people are posting basically porn on purpose, knowing it's for kids, and this is teenagers doing it, she thinks, and they're basically trying to wind everyone up by being, as you said, edgy, just pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a constant battle just to try and keep on top of it.
Well, that's why I said if I didn't have my friends helping me with community management, I would just have like a read-only server, which I've seen some game developers or some YouTuber game developers, they do that because clearly they're a one-man team and they don't want to do it, they want to handle it. Like, there's a guy on YouTube making a game about rollerblading, and you're a cat. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like a rollerblading cat girl.
It sounds like instant memeability success to me, but I've not seen it so far.
So his channel's brilliant, but when I looked at his Discord, it was surprising, but makes sense to see it was read-only. Like, all the channels were read-only, at least as far as I could see. Maybe it's changed.
At least,
but I thought it was clever.
When you do release on whether it's Steam or anywhere else, at that point they handle the refund side of things, so you don't have to have that layer of direct response to what you just said.
No, exactly. Well, when it comes to refunds, I am a bit of a softie. So if people are being rude about it, I'll be like, no. But if people are like polite about it, they're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, I'll refund them, because it's very easy to do on Patreon. But with Kickstarter, I think it's going to be a lot more final. Like, I'd have to manually send the money back, and that's just not something I'm like going to be willing to do. Just because that would be so much hassle, I think. But yeah, essentially, if people are being rude, they get kicked. That's kind of how it is. We just don't have enough bandwidth.
I'm on your Kickstarter. I'll try not to ask for a refund.
That's fine.
Caitlin, Rupert, any questions from you? Either of you?
If that's okay.
Go ahead.
In regards to the growing your Discord, how do you encourage engagement, and do you utilize things like custom emojis or games to kind of get people involved? I
didn't do enough that I did at the start. Was competitions, like art competitions or competitions, something in the game, and you can give rewards that are just like keys for the game. And people got really excited about that, and people were really interested in it. And I just didn't do it enough because it takes quite a lot of effort to run these things. And it was quite a good way to crowdsource ideas. So I ran competitions about posters that would be in the store. And yeah, it was just because I noticed lots of people were putting stuff in the art channel. So people like being artsy, and especially with the ones I ran, it wasn't about the quality of the art. It was literally the idea. So I was like, you can do something on Paint as long as it's like a good idea. We'll put it in the game. So the prize for the competition were copies of the game, but also it will go into the game, which is, I guess, quite an exciting one. But that really drove like interest and engagement for the Discord, but also just putting it in socials. On like YouTube and anywhere you're making content, people look for a Discord, and putting it on your website. Because I did get messages quite a lot. They're like, I can't find your Discord. So but I assume you guys already do that. But I think fundamentally, you just need to have something that's fueling these things. So you need some kind of content creation at the end of the day, whether it be trailers or TikToks or Twitch stream, just anything that's pulling people into it. Because I don't think they necessarily grow themselves, but maybe they do. I'm not really a community manager.
I know. I think people do need reminding. You need to keep reminding them what you're doing and how they can be involved.
Ziggy's actually shared a lot of really, really interesting stuff. So thank you for that, Ziggy. It's there's a lot to think about actually in terms of.
Essentially, fail upwards. Just just keep being successful.
Okay, this is what we have to do. Start falling.
Ziggy,
how long's your Kickstarter running for?
I think it was 60 days, and how long is left? Maybe a week.
A week left. Okay. So if anyone wants to go and fund Ziggy on his Kickstarter, you've got a week left.
I need more Twitter followers. I don't have any. I'm very low on Twitter followers. It's Ziggy Game Dev on Twitter. But if anyone's curious about the game, I think the TikTok is probably the best place to find out more information. So it's also Ziggy Game Dev at TikTok. But I also re-upload those on YouTube, so it's basically anywhere. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ziggy, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.